Hi, everybody, and welcome back to my weekly cult situation report, or welcome if you're new. I am Danielle, a scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership. I wrote a book called Uncultured, which you can see back there, about growing up in the Children of God religious cult and going into the cult of the U.S. Army. Now I am working on a book called The Culting of America, and I'll talk about that a little bit more a little bit later on. Every Friday, I give you a roll up of everything that has gone on in the world of cults and in my world of cults. And of course, we all live in a cult now because Cult 45 is running America. So, obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on with MAGA, and we're going to touch on some of that. But first, we're going to give ourselves a little break and touch on some cult adjacent figures. Just remember that if they can't control you by getting your buy in, like being a part of MAGA, then they want to control you by taking up your time and energy. Okay? The cult wants you to be exhausted. It's harder to think that way. I think it was like Monday or something when I was feeling very like, oh, our world is so terrible, very just apocalyptic about it all. And then I slept for 12 hours and woke up like ready to fight. So make sure you're taking care of yourself. Make sure you're still getting sleep and getting rest. Okay, so first we're going to talk about Tulsi Gabbard and Tulsi Gabbard's cult. Tulsi Gabbard, much like me, grew up in a cult that is an offshoot of Hare Krishna's, and I'm going to read to you about that a little bit. This is an article from the independent.co.uk. Tulsi Gabbard's ties to secretive cult may explain her perplexing political journey. Dr. Caroline Sinavayana Gabbard told The Independent in an interview that her niece's career is all about the pursuit of power. This was written right after she left the Democratic Party. To understand her ambitions, you need to look to her upbringing in a secretive cult called the Science of Identity Foundation, whose members show absolute loyalty to a reclusive guru, Chris Butler. Okay, she grew up in this cult just like I did in Children of God. A former member told The Independent that the group's teachings are virulently homophobic, often anti Islamic, and misogynist, and how they were forced to worship Butler, who is considered to be akin to God. Sinavayana Gabbard says her niece's career is all about the pursuit of power, and her bid for the presidency in 2020 was the culmination of 4 decades of Butler's efforts to seek political influence. Because cults are all about political power, and in today's America, they seem to be getting it. Once again, this is a direct quote from her aunt. I find my niece is apparent penchant for parroting extremist toadies such as Tucker Carlson and vile strongmen such as Vladimir Putin to be problematic and deeply troubling. Her niece is her aunt is a retired college professor. It gives me no pleasure to note that Tulsi's single governing principle seems to be expedience, which is in effect no principle at all. Right, so what are the issues? Gabbard is a veteran who served a tour of Iraq and still serves with the National Guard, where she is a lieutenant colonel, which is a fairly high rank. In statements after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Gabbard contended that the Ukraine was not worth protecting because it isn't actually a democracy. This baseless claim and that the US funded biolabs could result in the release of dangerous pathogens. This baseless claim echoed Russian propaganda that the United States was funding labs in Ukraine to make illegal biological weapons for use against Russia. Senator Mitt Romney responded by saying Gabbard was spreading treasonous lies. Okay, there's all these different things that she did for Russia that helped Russia. Forbes revealed in 2021 that Gabbard's biggest political donor is a pro-Putin apologist. And in March, it was revealed that Elena Branson, a dual U.S. Russian citizen accused of spying for the Kremlin, donated to her campaign for re-election to Congress in 2019. Gabbard has consistently echoed GOP positions on immigration and LGBTQ plus issues, and recently claimed that Florida's Don't Say Gay bill was too moderate. flies to Syria. She does a lot of meeting with dictators. She could have voted to impeach Donald Trump, but she didn't. And now she has a position in his administration that's not at all suspicious. You know, it goes on and on. The cult that she's in is quite serious. I believe it's an offshoot of Hare Krishna's. We're going to have someone from there on our show soon. Sorry, we got to hear the dog barking about the mailman. Some books flitting their way off to you. Okay, so that's Tulsi Gabbard, who questionably is a Russian intelligence asset. Definitely all kinds of problematic stuff. And spent part of her youth in a cult in the Philippines, like I did. Yeah, okay. And then there's Coney Barrett, who's on the Supreme Court, who was in a cult called People of Praise. And this is an article from Newsweek. A sworn affidavit from the 1990s from a former member of a secretive religious group with alleged ties to the Supreme Court, Justice Coney Barrett described an environment of complete control one woman faced during her involvement. The affidavit, which was detailed in a report by The Guardian published Monday, also described instances in which the founder of People of Praise and his wife took part in sexual displays in front of children and others. Barrett's alleged involvement with the religious group, which was scrutinized after former President Donald Trump nominated her to replace the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the court, has gained new relevance after a leaked draft opinion showed that the court's majority was poised to roll back the constitutional right to an abortion. Now we know all of that stuff. People of Praise, a self-described charismatic Christian community that encompasses a variety of churches, includes Roman Catholics, Lutherans, Episcopalians, and Methodists. This just means it's non-denominational. This just means the cult has created their own worldview, okay? It was founded in 1971 in South Bend, Indiana by Kevin Reganon and has since drawn 1,700 members with a presence in 22 cities around the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean. The group says on its website that its community life is characterized by deep and lasting friendships. We share together in small meals, blah, blah, blah. To become a full member of People of Praise, those interested must make a covenant commitment, which the group says is made freely and only after a period of discernment lasting several years. Yes, most cults make you work pretty hard to prove that you are able to be one of them. Our covenant is neither an oath nor a vow, but it is an important personal commitment, the group says. We teach the People of Praise members should always follow their conscience. But the affidavit reviewed by The Guardian and stories from former members shed a darker light on existence that they saw as their reality while involved with the People of Praise. Former member says, I describe it as a cult. She described alleged abuse and torture from her husband at the time, as well as shunning, shaming, and a smear campaign that she was said conducted against her when she ultimately escaped and left. So, just two people in old Cult 45 circle that have their own little cult involvements. And as we know, or maybe don't, Mormons, there are many, many, many Mormons that work for the government because it's easy for them to get secret clearances because they're squeaky clean backgrounds and speaking of many languages. So, fun times. And people can be in multiple cults at once. Like you can be in Tulsi Gabbard's cult and in the MAGA cult. But at some point, if the cults conflict with each other, then people have to choose, like, which one is their ultimate cult, right? But, like, for example, Mormons start many, many, many MLMs, which are commercial cults. But if the two conflicted, they'd probably have to choose Mormonism. Okay. Today's topic, the fork in the road memo that Trump sent to everyone. Okay, so first of all, we are just now coming out of kind of surviving The first 10 days, this was just like the shock and awe campaign. And I remind you, they want you to be really very tired. Um, They want you to be very tired, but it is also important to know that he's trying to do all these things. As I've said before on this channel, he is trying to be a dictator, right? 100% out in the open. But things are pushing back. People are pushing back, right? He's doing his bloviating and his performing for his crowd, and now he's doing it through executive orders, but people are pushing back. Okay, his birthright citizenship got thrown out for being blatantly unconstitutional. Brazil and Colombia did not accept flights of immigrants from him, which of course now means he's embarrassed. So he's going to go put them down in Guantanamo Bay, which should be interesting cognitive dissonance for his base because they've been claiming that he shut it down the first time after evil Obama failed to. So, now they're going to put 30,000 people there. This is really important. Everybody, you can call your congresspeople about this and tell them that we don't accept prison camps and labor camps. Like, this is not okay. Um, and also, people are pushing back. People are talking about it, okay? What was different in World War II is nobody would even believe what was actually going on. So we have to believe it, and we have to push back, and we have to really talk about what we can do. There's also been pushback going on from the military. First thing that he did, of course, is get rid of DEI, and so the mention of Tuskegee Airmen and women fighter pilots in World War II were cut. And then there was such an outcry that they were put back within 2 days. So, like, they were cut for the weekend. It is important when we talk about things and when we push back on what is going on right now. Of course, there was a major helicopter crash here in DC, which is where I am talking to you from. And first of all, there's just been so many conspiracies about it, but let me just say, on day one, he gutted the FAA safety regulations and the Coast Guard. Okay? This was a expectable, predictable accident. But even before there was any information, the conspiracy theories were starting, especially on the left. And y'all, like, you're doing the bad guys' work for them. And what was very apparent was that people that had aviation experience, and especially military aviation experience, like, 7 years in aviation brigade. My husband, 20 years as first a mechanic and then a pilot. Both of us as people who owned an airplane in the DC space. Nobody was giving theories because we know that's not how it works. You wait and you get the information and then you talk about what happened. But the amount of people I see saying it was a remote control helicopter and it literally had to get on social media and be like, y'all, the US military doesn't have suicide helicopter pilots. Like, you're doing the bad guys' work for them. The message needs to be safety regulations were gutted, and safety regulations are usually written in blood. And now 67 more people are dead. And please, like, the panic and the conspiracies, it's not going to help anything. You're not going to be awake and strong enough to fight back when comes the time that we need to fight back. And back to the fork in the road memo, right? This memo that OPM sent out, like, this is so similar to the Twitter memo that got sent out, which is being talked about in Culting of America, by the way. And we do have a fundraiser for Culting of America going on because we are now self-publishing that book. But talking about Twitter when Elon Musk first took over and was like, it's going to be work all the time. And now Donald Trump is doing this with large parts of the American government, right? Everybody has been called back into work in the office of, like, all government agencies, even though there's literally not the space for them because that's not how the government has been being run in DC for the last decade. Demanding more work from people, right? One of my best friends works for FEMA and is also a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserves, Danielle, if you've read the book. Um, and they're, the brain drain is starting from FEMA. People are leaving because everybody is insecure about what is going on, right? They're trying all these little cult tactics from all the little entrepreneur gurus, like, oh, offering people money to quit their job that came from Zappos. You know what Zappos turned into? A cult where there were quite a few suicides, and then the founder was ousted and then died in a very suspicious fire. Um, Cult leaders love to take notes from each other. They just love it, man. And this is exactly like the cult thing that is implied in performance culture language, right? Cults are all about labor, exploitation of labor. I have a whole chapter of this in Culting of America. Um, this section on enforced standards of conduct. They're basically saying, we'll be watching you and you might be found wanting. And if we do decide to keep you, you will be rewarded for your exceptionality. You will just get to stick around and that should be enough. Extremely creeptastic, extremely cult leadery. Like, you do the work for the work's sake. And in Culting of America, I've coined this term missionizing, right? Weaponizing a mission and then using that to get the constant self sacrifice of your members, which in turn is our step 4 in the cult, leads to step 8, the exploitation of labor. Like, this is what is going on right now. Please be supportive if your friends, if they are contending with this. If you have any friends that work for the government, they are probably not having the time of their lives right now. And other people that have already started to be affected, right? Trump is already affecting people's everyday lives. So please try to support them. Try to think about what you can do. One thing that we can all do, two things that we can all do, is talk to our representatives and tell them this is not acceptable and tell them how we want them to vote. And donate to the ACLU, because that is one of the checks and balances that is going to be keeping Trump at bay. We've just recovered from the first hit, right, of the shock and awe campaign, and now the lawyers go to work and the civil rights people who have been doing this fight the whole time go to work. So we need to listen to them. I specifically want to talk to white women in America who didn't vote for Trump. 48% of us. We have a lot of power. White women in America command trillions and trillions of dollars because we tend to be the one who manage household finances. We have more money than them. We have more power than them. And we can use our whiteness, once we deconstruct it, as a shield for people who don't have that protection and as a weapon. So one of the things that I have been sitting with is one of the women who was on one of the first deliberate ground combat teams, wrote a best-selling book about it, and get that attached here, am having to watch Hog's Breath take over as the Secretary of Defense. The worst, rapiest bro. This is it. We're watching the bad guys run the country, right, at every level. And so I'm here contending with the fact that they just try to weaponize the idea that nobody wants to see dead American ladies and mothers, right? They mean white, right? The nation, the poor white supremacist heart of the nation doesn't have the nerve to see dead American white ladies. And that's a weapon that we can use against them. I would finally like to tell all of you, I have heard the term martial law so many times. This is an example of complying in advance. So many people say to me on social media, well, we should be marching, but we're not because he wants an excuse to enact martial law. So please listen to me as someone who was an officer in your military when I tell you that no country in the world has an army, a military large enough to enforce martial law in America. And so back to you white women, If you hear martial law declared in America, you take yourselves and your children and your little lawn chairs and you go sit out in the streets. 25-year-old captains are not going to be ordering 20-year-old diverse service members down your streets to mow down you and your children. Make them come for it. There are some very significant parallels between dictatorships of the past and horrible people like Mustache Man and Donald Trump. But there's also some really significant differences. When I was in college, I studied in Germany for a semester, which was glorious and such a great experience. And I thought it was really funny because Germans themselves make this joke about the German temperament. And they say, the reason we've never had a popular revolution in Germany is because the peasants couldn't afford the train fare. Because a German would never not pay the train fare to go ride the train to the protest, right? In America, we'll rip up your train lines. Be ungovernable. And of all of the militaries in the world that understand that we could not take America and hold America by force, is the American military. We have just learned that lesson real hard in a place known as the Graveyard of Empires, Afghanistan. So they want you in a panic. They want you exhausted so that you can't fight back. As we talked about last week, the thing about the apocalypse is that when you think everything's going to end, you just sit down and hug your family. And I can't remember if I talked about this on the last one, so I'm going to talk about it now. The cult I grew up in, the Children of God, they had a song. It was called 20 Minutes to Go. How much love can you show? All my Children of God followers are triggered now. And this was the whole point, right? Height of the Cold War. You get the sign, you get the message. Like that one time went out to the whole island of Hawaii, right? Like, the whole state of Hawaii. Sorry, all the islands. Like rockets incoming, 20 minutes. Like, there's nothing you can do. You're just gonna sit down and hug your family, and that's what they want, so that they can then come take over. Even when Trump had his skinny white woman press secretary, anonymous white lady. If you don't know what I'm talking about with the skinny white woman, this is an archetype that we see in white American cults that I have named the skinny white woman. And that so often in white led American cults, we see this skinny white woman next to the cult leader, whitewashing the sins of the cult leader. If you are sex trafficking children, Jeffrey Epstein, who you need next to you is Ghislaine Maxwell. This is the skinny white woman. And so many of you identified it. Oh, I was so proud. I was so proud of all of you. But he trots her out, and he trots her out to tell us nothing. They were flying with FAA approval. Oh, and it was some hobbiness. This is about drones. I remind you, nobody who knows about drones is talking to you about drones. I've seen a lot of conspiracies about this too. Oh, well, why didn't Biden say anything? Because nobody that knows anything about drones is talking to you about drones. So they just gave us nothing. Trump trotted out lady with huge Christian cross that should have been in flames to tell you nothing. The most nothing answer they could give you. And then ended with, this was not the enemy. Not this was not an enemy. Not don't be worried about it. This was not the enemy. Because that's where he wants to leave you. In a panic. Don't let him do it. And now for some nitpickings. Here is Knitted Cult Puppy style. Hello, hello, hello. I was super grumpy 'cause it's raining and I can't go outside. All right, so I got this in New York, knockoff Louis Vuitton scarf so that I could make a scarf again out of it. And then I tried to make a scarf again, which I cut it in half, and I usually cut it down the front, and it just started to disintegrate. And I was like, uh-oh. So then I made this, and I was like, I can't cut it anymore. I made this tunic looking thing, and then I thought it was glorious. You could wear it both ways, but Red looks good on me, so I'm probably never going to wear it that way. And I was like, is this high fash or is this ridic? And sometimes I think the difference is just wearing it with confidence. Anyways, I've never been complimented on any individual thing more. So we have a new kind of scarf again, and me and Knitting Cult Baby call it the card again. Card scarf again, because we look like Alice in Wonderland playing card soldiers. Okay. Also, my Lord and Savior Taylor Allison Swift finally wore something I wanted to emulate. Wore? Why did I just say weird? So we made fuzzy maroon jacket. Yeah. And it's not done yet because the sleeves aren't the same length. But one of my Christmas presents to me was the Dalmatian vest, and then I put some fuzzy sleeves on it. So it's going to be really kicky. And this commission sweater that you have maybe seen me working on in a lot of my content that I made for somebody. And there's these hearts down the front, and these are called cables. Comes from twisting your stitches around each other. In case you're wondering what I'm making, there you go. So that's going to be flying its way out soon. And that is all you got from me today. I just realized you probably couldn't hear any of that stuff that I was saying while I was showing the clothes because I was too far away from my microphone. I'm still learning. Thanks for hanging out. Come back next week for the Cult Situation Report. I am Danielle, a scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership. And my critically acclaimed best-selling book is on audio. 4.9 stars, I found out recently. Have a day, y'all.